Chapter 36. The Night King. You're staring, Finley. Vex reached over and pushed Finley's lower jaw up. There was an audible click. Open-mouthed. Finley blinked rapidly. It's you. Vex's smile was brilliant, like the flash of a dying star. Yes, it is me. The Night King tilted his head to the side. Just like Rayleigh had said, there were no blood tattoos on his face, but they went up to his chin like a tight-fitting collar. There were so many lines that it was dizzying. There were patches of pale flesh here and there, but they were rare. Finley realized there were layers of blood tattoos. Weapon upon weapon upon weapon upon armor, and more must have been printed upon the Night King's skin. Whoa, so much power, so much pain, Finley amended, for he knew that every blood weapon came from an incident that must have seared Vex's soul. Over such a long life, of course, there would be many great losses. But still, there were so many blood tattoos. Too many, cruelly many. Finley felt a wave of empathy fill him for Vex. Everything bad that had ever happened to him, and clearly more than his fair share had, was inked onto his body for all to see. Was leaving Declan on Earth the cause of one of those? I've read about you, everything I could find. Most of it was nonsense and superstition, but some of it seemed reliable. I've questioned every person who might know anything about you and your people. Basically, I've sought out every single thing I could find about you, and you're here. Finley gestured to the elegantly, if lightly, dressed Night King. And you saved me. Vex lifted an elegant eyebrow, still amused. Did I? The Leviathan. Finley pointed towards the fang that lay on the dark stone ground. It seemed so ridiculous that these terrible beings could be reduced to a single half-moon of bone. You opened the rift and killed it just in time. A second more and I would have been dead. Oh, yes. That. Vex pursed his lips as if he had forgotten, as if it had been nothing. And it probably had been. Vex had killed the Leviathan as easy as breathing. It was hardly a foe worth remembering, even though, for Finley, it would have meant the end of his very short life if Vex had delayed even a second. It couldn't have been a coincidence that you saved me. I mean, I suppose it could have. Everything is possible in some mathematically slim equation. But I was going to die. Finley's voice rose and cracked at the end of that statement. There was nothing I could do. I was helpless. Vex's red eyes were fixed upon him, studying him. Finley could almost feel the incisive mind behind them. So old, so intelligent. The wisdom of millennia. The other elves he met seemed like children in comparison. How did that feel? Vex asked. Maybe not that imaginative? Finley let out an uncertain, angry laugh. Being helpless? Almost dying? Not good. Are you certain? Vex asked. Finley opened his mouth to say, Of course I'm certain. But he stopped himself. He doubted. No, he was absolutely certain that the Night King said nothing lightly. Everything he spoke had meaning, perhaps multiple meanings that would have to be parsed out later. Was it only not good? Or was it edifying? Perhaps even clarifying? Vex's elegant, pale eyebrow rose. Finley could see Declan's features in that beautiful face, delicate yet masculine, fine-drawn yet lush. Vex continued, In my life, those moments of failure, of utter despair, led me to greater heights than I ever would have dreamed of before then. So what about you? To be compared to the Night King was heady stuff indeed. Finley knew he would hug that comment to his chest when doubt and despair filled him. Vex compared them, even it was a single spark to the sun. Finley blinked slowly as he let Vex's question settle in his brain. He looked down at his hands, which were empty of weapons. He remembered wishing a fireball could form the palm of his right one. But no. There was no crackling of fire, no glitter of plasma, no snap of electricity. And no matter what he put in that hand, from sword to bow to gun, it wouldn't have mattered. He would have been just as helpless as if he had held nothing at all. In this brave new world, to be without magic was to be as good as dead. So it had been edifying, even more so than the original war had been. Declan won't always be there to save me. In fact, he wasn't a knight. What if I'm the only one around and it was Gemma in danger, or Michael or Shonda? Being killed myself is bad enough, but to stand there while they are hurt or killed? No. No. I don't want this. I can't bear this. The words were ripped out of him. Finley swore he tasted blood on his tongue, and he felt the hot gush of it flowing down his throat. He clenched his hands into fists, digging his fingernails into the soft flesh, being so weak and helpless, being kept from magic, knowing it's there and forever out of reach. I can't. No, I just can't. Good. Now you understand your goal. Vex nodded. The next thing is to figure out what you're willing to do to achieve it. Anything, But Vex was walking away. Finley opened his mouth and looked all around him. Should he follow? The others would worry about him. He was already certain that Raelif was losing his mind, while Declan would be stoic and silent, but bleeding inside, as he looked for Finley's mangled corpse. But the rift was gone, so there was no going back to Earth until and unless Vex created another one. And even if Vex wasn't the most fascinating person to him in existence, he didn't want to stay alone in the Underdark. If the Pedway and the L Station had been dangerous, the Underdark would put those to shame. So he hustled after Vex's elegant form. I know everyone will be worried about me when they realize I'm gone. But if they see my body isn't there, then they'll realize I escaped through a rift. But then he frowned. There was an alternative scenario that they might consider as well. Or they'll think that a Leviathan carried me back to a nest, just like Declan's father, adopted father. His real one may be walking beside me. He and Vex were now walking side by side down a smooth black stone road that wound in graceful curves towards the entrance of Illithor. It was wide enough that 100 people could have stood shoulder to shoulder from one side of it to the other and have room to do jumping jacks. How many people came and went from Illithor on a daily basis? It's huge. It must have been a hub of incredible industry and productivity. People from all over must have come here to work and go to school, to make their way to the top. In Illithor, there were legends to be made. The Underdark is like the Hollow Earth, Finley remarked, but then realizing that Vex likely had no idea what that theory was, he stumbled on. The idea is that the surface is just a thin coating for a whole world underground, that there are layer after layer of incredible civilizations living beneath our feet. And the further down you go, the more mysteries there are, Vex agreed. And you've gone down really far. Farther than anyone? Finley's eyes flickered to the Night King, but Vex just smiled. Ahead of them was Illithor. The many purple towers punched upwards towards the cavern ceiling, so far above their heads that it might as well have been the night sky. Glowing lichen, at least that's what Finley guessed it was, twinkled up there rather like stars. Light came not from a sun or a moon, but from large clusters of crystal that burned blue or red or dark purple. They studded the ceiling and the ground. As they passed one large chunk, Finley swore he heard a faint tinkling sound. He reached to touch it, but Vex caught his wrist neatly with 2 fingers. It will burn you, Vex explained. Oh, good to know, Finley said, and brought his hands tight to his sides after Vex had released him. The Night King's touch was always seemingly brief. Finley wondered why. Would touching Vex hurt him too? Illithor was surrounded on all sides by huge stone walls that rose up like mountain ranges. He'd read that Illithor was bounded by a great underground ocean of night-black water where glowing things lived and ate unwary sailors. But that must be on the other side of the city. This was the land side. He glanced over his shoulder and saw that the avenue they were on continued off into the vastness. I wonder what other places this road leads to. He turned back around feeling that tug of discovery, but knowing that Illithor was more than enough to occupy him for this visit. He assumed it was a visit. Surely Vex would open a rift for him to go home. Surely Vex would come too, for Declan. I have so many questions to ask him. I don't know where to begin. Vex was humming a tune under his breath. It was beautiful, but sorrowful, at least to Finley's ears. He didn't seem at all in any hurry to get to know Finley better, or say anything at all. But what was time for someone like Vex, who had eons spooled out behind him and endless ones ahead? Finley opened and closed his mouth half a dozen times, trying to find that perfect beginning. It was absurd to stay silent when the elf he had long admired, and maybe it was a little more than admiration, was right there. He didn't know if he'd get another chance to speak with him. But if he was Declan's father, then there was no rush. Oh, the gates of Illithor, he gasped. Teneron, that is what they are named, Vex corrected. The mouth that devours. That seems accurate. Golden gates stretched up over 100 feet above their heads and barred their path into the city. They shone as if lit from within. Finley wondered how they would get in. Would Vex use magic to open them? Would he simply fly them over the wall? Or perhaps he would teleport them inside? Without a word or gesture, the gates suddenly began to swing open of their own accord. There was a clanking sound as internal machinery moved the massive doors. Finley's lips parted. They were going into Illithor. They were really going inside. He would be the first in how many millennia? And he would have the Night King as his guide. Suddenly, nearly dying seemed like a very small price to pay for this. Is this why you're here? To visit your old city? Finley finally asked. Or is it to see Declan? This was a risk to bring up his best friend. If he were wrong about what Declan was to Vex, or if he misunderstood that it was Vex that had secreted Declan away on Earth, he could be putting his best friend in danger. But if Vex knew about him, and he clearly did as he knew Finley's name, then he must know of Declan. In fact, his relationship with Declan must be the reason that Vex claimed to want to get to know him. Or it could be because of Raelif. He is Vex's nephew, but I've just met him. That's too new a friendship to attract the Night King's attention. Vex's smile at the name of his best friend had Finley's heart lifting. Whatever else might be true, Vex had seemingly very good feelings towards Declan. My Raven. He put one elegant hand against the center of his chest. There were delicate tattoos across the backs of his fingers. Finley wondered what weapons they were. I am most eager to be with him. Eager? That's good. I hope that Declan is eager too. Will it be a shock? Raven? Finley clarified. Is that Declan's real name? A nod. Prince Raven Veduzor, Zinzadoral Vex. A frown. Zinzadoral? I swear I've heard that name before. Oh! Declan asked me if I'd ever read about anyone with that name. He asked me about it just last night. At the inn. Was that Declan recovering some of his memories even then? Why did you take Raven's memories? Finley asked. He doesn't, or maybe didn't even know he wasn't human. He didn't realize he should stay out of the sun and... But now he knows, Vex murmured. Yes, he just figured that out. Finley did not want to say how Declan had figured that out, or that it was Vex's nephew who had helped him figure that out. For all he knew, Raelif was right to think his uncle still thought him a traitor. Maybe Vex wasn't even aware that Raelif wasn't Tyrael at all, and how do you like my nephew? Vex interrupted. Finley winced, and his eyes darted towards the Night King, who had his hands now loosely crossed at the wrists behind his lower back, appearing for all the world like he had nothing at all in his mind, even though they were entering a city he had abandoned ages ago. And if there were any enemies about, he didn't appear worried whatsoever. In fact, Finley didn't see any Leviathan or traces of them. But he supposed that if they had been nesting here, Vex had simply destroyed them as simply and as easily as he had the one that had wanted to kill Finley. It's like you're reading my mind, Finley sighed. Raelif is arrogant. Vex looked amused. Finley snorted. He liked Raelif much better now than he had when he'd first met him, but there was no denying he was arrogant. even if that arrogance was earned. Yes, but vain? Vex's amusement grew. Finley's mouth flattened as he thought of Raeliff practically oozing out of his clothes so that everyone could admire his powerful chest and lean hips. Well, he does think highly of his looks. Ambitious. That brought Finley up short, and he realized it was a real question. Vex was asking him if he thought that Raeliff was ambitious, perhaps ambitious enough to join a coup against the Night King. He had to be careful when answering this, and truthful. He knew that no lie would get past Vex. Actually, no. That's the one thing he isn't, Finley said slowly. I believe what he enjoys most in life is slinging spells better than most anyone else, drinking too much wine, and eating tons of good food. And sex. My nephew has almost as prodigious an appetite as I do for breaking hearts. Vex's red eyes hooded when he shot a glance at Finley. Finley pinked and stutter-stepped before he realized he was being left behind again, and he didn't wish to be, even though this place was amazing, Finley breathed as they stepped through the gates and he could really see the interior of the city. It looks more grown than built. That's because it was, Vex answered. Clever boy to realize that, though the buildings look like stone, metal, and glass. They are more than that. The soaring buildings that stretched so high into the air that Finley could not see the tops of them surrounded a large square right inside the gates. Finley imagined that hundreds of people would have gone in and out of Illithor here, the great capital city of the Kindreth Empire. For a moment, he thought he could almost see them, all dressed in jewel-colored silks, mostly dark colors, but with pops of colors in crimson and gold. As they spoke in the liquid accents of Illithor, they would likely have been shops and stalls that would have sold street food and whatever the weary traveler needed. Sword for sale, just what you need to keep you safe and climb the ranks of the city's elite. He imagined a squat dwarven weaponsmith calling out to the crowd, Scrolls preloaded with powerful spells to use on your enemies. No need to worry about slurring a word or skipping a movement of a hand with these scrolls. Fireballs will bloom like roses under the high moon. He imagined a Kindreth woman saying, a dark green skirt slid up to her hips. Need a place to stay? Don't have the coin? No worries. We here at the Temple of the Arctuthia offer soft beds, warm meals, and friendly faces. A Kindreth man dressed in saffron-colored robes would call, Come join us. Wouldn't go with him if I were you, the dwarven swordsmith would mutter under his breath. Anyone who does never returns. Sacrificed in Arcturithia's altars or sold into slavery ends the same. Life as you know it is over. Imagining your game set here, Vex asked, breaking him out of his reverie. What? You know about my game? Finley blinked at him, unsure if he was thrilled, worried, or both. Maybe both. How do you know about that? Oh, you must be watching? Listening? He wondered if Vex knew he was the big bad in Finley's game. Of course he did. Because it seemed like whatever Finley hoped he didn't know, he did. Vex simply smiled. Yes, I admit I was imagining my game right here. How I would describe it to others, Finley said. A dwarven weaponsmith who will give you a deal if you help him find his missing brother. A scroll seller who works for the local thieves guild and has a quest for the less savory players. Steals some ancient artifacts from a leering noble. And then there would be a priest who offers you help, only to try and slit the players' throats at the end. The players will have to kill him and his god to get out of that encounter. Vex chuckled. That is an accurate representation of what the market was. Was. Is that sadness in his eyes and his voice? Why did he leave the city then? Or even if he left it, why shut it down like this? Why not let it keep going, keep thriving? It seems like such a waste. They continued walking forwards across the large, empty square that was silent except for their footfalls. Or really, Finley's footfalls, because even spelled, he made more noise than the shoeless Vex. And his feet aren't even getting dirty. He's walked for how long and through who knows what in the Underdark to get here, and he's spotless. You said earlier that you think Ravin knows he is not human. Vex suddenly said, "But surely you are the one person who would be certain of what he thinks. You are his best friend, are you not?" Finley nodded. "I don't think he realized it until yesterday. Maybe not even until today." "His memories are well hidden from him, to be sure," Vex agreed. "I left to go to town before he was up and about, so we couldn't talk then. He has some errands to do as well. And then we were caught up in going after Darkassin, who—" He stopped as he caught Vex looking at him out of the corner of his eye. He swallowed. These were excuses. They were valid, but they were excuses. He hadn't sought Declan out on the long ride to Chicago. He hadn't attempted to gain his ear in the Thompson Center. It was almost like they were avoiding each other. I think I think Declan's afraid to tell me what he thinks about that." "Oh? Why?" Vex feigned innocence. Finley sighed. "I think you know." But Vex said nothing, so Finley found himself filling the empty air. "He used magic against Leviathan when they first attacked Earth. I thought he was human then, and if he could use magic, then maybe other humans could. Like me. But he is not human. He is Kindreth." Vex stated simply. "Exactly. Which means that what everyone has been telling me about humans and magic is true." Finley felt the weight of that knowledge settle on his slender shoulders. It felt like it might crush him. "Which is?" "Humans don't have magic," Finley answered flatly. "Really? Who told you that?" Vex chuckled, and was heading down the long, graceful avenue towards a central garden that rose up in the center of the city. Finley stared at his back. It was covered in delicate, beautiful tattoos. Some of them glittered. He raced to catch up with Vex again. "Are you saying that there is a way that humans can wield magic? Like the Arve? Like the Kindreth?" Finley asked. There were so many questions he should be asking Vex right there and then. Far less selfish ones, like why did Vex abandon Declan here? Why was Vex back? Did he intend the Arve harm? Did he intend Raelif harm? But he couldn't help himself. The allure of magic was too much. "Like the Arve? Like the Kindreth?" "No," Vex answered lightly. Finley's heart tumbled into his feet. "So then humans can't wield magic?" "Of course they can. Just not like immortal beings. You try to use life to power your magic, and you will snuff out like a candle." Vex snapped his fingers as if to demonstrate just how quick it would be. "Yes, that's what Raelif said, so if not life, then—" "Tcha! It looks like the garden enchantment has been lagging. Look at those plants hanging down from the buildings. They are quite overgrown," Vex tutted. This statement drew Finley's attention to the dark blue stone buildings that framed the other side of the avenue they walked on. They were a bit like skyscrapers, tall and sheer, flying upwards for tens of stories. But unlike human skyscrapers, there were winding staircases and gracious patios that were open to the air, crawling up the outside of the buildings. He imagined that people would throng those spaces, talking, laughing, and showing off for those below and their neighbors. The plants that were vexing the Night King were flowing over the sides of the building like waterfalls. He highly doubted that the Night King was truly upset about this. The plants were pretty and appeared to not be doing any harm, so he'd mentioned them as a ruse to steer the conversation to something new. "He's not going to tell me about how humans can use magic. Not yet. He's told me something huge. I should appreciate that and be patient," Finley cautioned himself. "You asked me earlier how I liked your nephew," Finley said carefully. "Yes, and you do?" "I surprisingly do." "Surprisingly? Oh, he will be hurt by that," Vex chuckled. "Perhaps, but his ego, as you are well aware of, hardly needs inflating, and I don't see how my regard truly matters." Finley waved off the idea of it even as he felt the press of Raelif's lips against his forehead, just before the elf had gone off into combat. "Oh, I hurt for him now," Vex grinned. He had very white teeth. His eye teeth were more pointed than a human's, than other elves, too. More like a vampire's in a way. Doesn't detract from his looks. He's rather harder edged than any of the elves I've seen with that half-shaved head and barely any clothes. For what it's worth, here Finley licked his lips, I don't believe he was in the coup against you. Vex's silence at his blanket assertion Made him wonder if he'd made a mistake saying that. He risked glancing over at the Night King. Vex's expression was unreadable. Finley hurried on. You probably think I'm presumptuous, at best, for saying something like that to you. Between the two of us, hell, between you and everyone, you'd know a person's motivations better. I've only known Rayleigh for a short time, but you believe what you say about him, Vex stated. I do, Finley nodded. I'm not saying he doesn't lie. He winced here. He does that a lot, but not to get ahead. Not exactly. He did lie to the Sun King. He didn't exactly go for low-hanging fruit where he chose who to befriend. But Finley was certain that it was because Rayleigh enjoyed the finer things in life. And what better person to get those for him than the Sun King? He likes to be pampered and thought handsome and clever and witty and sexy and, well, you get the idea. But I don't think he wants to rule anything. He just wants to enjoy himself. Ruling would be too much work. He'd actually have to do something. Vex suddenly laughed. It was a joyous sound and it appeared genuine. His red eyes glowed like the coals in a fire. I do believe you're right. My nephew would rather have the credit for a thing than to actually do it. And ruling is hard work. Thinking perhaps he had discredited Rayleigh a little too much, Finley added, and he's incredibly loyal to his friends. He's kind, which probably for a Kindreth would be considered a weakness. His eyes flickered to Vex. The Night King bobbed his head, whether in agreement or not was unclear. They had reached a graceful bridge that arched over a span of water. On the other side was that park with winding paths and some kind of monument on the top of it. Or not a monument, but a white stone building. Too small to be a house. It appeared that Vex was leading them there. Finley wondered what it was. He's terrified you're here to kill him. I'd like to be able to tell him that you're not, Finley said. Oh, but what would be the fun in that? Vex asked with a raised eyebrow. Finley could have said that there was no fun for Rayleigh in thinking he was in his uncle's crosshairs, but he had a feeling that wasn't something Vex worried about. But you appear to be the loyal one, pleading his case to me though you've just met, believing in his kindness, Vex said. Finley considered his answer to this. He focused on the plants that Vex had been complaining of before. These appeared quite tame. The trees, black bark with silver leaves, kept well clear of the gracious crushed stone paths. Crimson flowers bobbed in an unseen breeze, sending billowing clouds of glowing pollen amongst the trunks, but staying clear of where they walked. Finally, Finley decided the cold, hard truth was the best way to respond. He's the first elf who has ever treated me like I mattered. Like I had something to offer, something worth listening to. Finley admitted and was biting his lower lip. Would Vex think that stupid? More weakness? More patheticness? But then the Night King was cupping his cheek and raising his head so that they were eye to eye. Like you, Finley, I lived for a long time with no magic. Others moved ahead of me with ease. I was considered nothing, and I was made to feel it. But that's crazy. You're the most powerful mage to ever live, Finley cried out. Vex smiled. Indeed. And I loved every moment of rubbing into their faces just how wrong they were. Rising above them all, ruling them all, killing many of them. Finley's lips parted at the way Vex's voice had dropped into an Arctic register as he said the last bit. Elves are immortal, Finley, so they draw their power from life, their own life, the life around them. He gestured broadly to the thriving plant life. But humans are mortal. Death is closer to them than life. Life is but a flicker. Death is nearly eternal for them. And it is in death that you will find your power. The one hand that Vex had been gesturing with, elegant and tattooed even on the palm, swung towards the white stone building on the top of the hill they were climbing. And Finley knew what it was then. It was a tomb. The Night Prince is fantasy with two main couples and even more complex relationships. Though I write most from the main four's perspectives, that's Declan, Aquilin, Finley, and Rayleigh, there are also chapters from other important characters too. all this means that The Night Prince is destined to be very long, at least 200 chapters full of action, politics, humor, and romance. We are barely getting started. From the comments so far, nobody has even come close to guessing some of the turns the story is going to take. I hope that you are with me for the journey. Thank you so much for supporting us.